Yeah.
Or you could ask that under the section.
Brian?
Which may be good.
That thing's malfunctioning.
Oh,
Okay, welcome to the Board Policy Committee meeting, May 21st, 2019. Has the meeting been properly posted?
Yes, we have.
It has, thank you. And we have no citizens here addressing us, nor do we have any bright lights, but we do have some action and discussion items tonight. First would be the Policy Committee minutes from April. We have here, well, that was a big list, wasn't it?
it was a big list.
Yeah. So Diane, would you be willing to,
Yes, I move that we approve them as presented.
thank you, and I second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No? No. Okay, 2-0. Okay. We have 2 recommended updates that we will be approving tonight to go forward to the next full board meeting in June. And this is 5341, emergency medical authorization. And this was an addition of, or I don't know if I'd call it an addition, but where it's stored, I guess, is the question. And it has added the words easily accessible physical or electronic file in a school or a student management system. I'm not sure which one we would be.
So Infinite Campus has the ability to load in the student record, which is being done in many locations, where that stuff is being loaded and stored electronically. Diane, if you remember back when you were perhaps supervising a field trip and you had to bring the emergency medical cards along, when you were supervising, we still would maintain a paper version, where appropriate. So that's what this policy gives us the authority to do.
And there's really nothing else to it.
Nope.
So again, I'm going to be leaning on you all night tonight. Do we have a motion for committee approval of this 5341?
Yes, I move that we accept the revisions to policy 5341 on emergency as presented.
Thank you, and I'll second that. Any discussion? And do we have this up and running?
Yes.
Okay, we have it up and running, so we're just making the policy fit the
our
mechanics. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, so that would be 2-0, Lynn. Policy 5540 was one that we talked about at the last board meeting. It had some questions, relatively, some cautions, I guess, about this, and I think you were going to research it.
Yeah, so I did some research in looking at it, and so the first thing I did was speak to some administration that has been in the district for a long time, that has been in this role, particularly at the high school level. And our practice has always been to let the investigation happen, and then the phone call was made to get the parents, to try to get the parents in the loop. And I spoke with administrators in other districts as part of this. And again, the general practice there was that if there is an investigation going on and there's a questioning that's needed, that people can come in, the police can come in, they can conduct that, and then the attempt to contact parents is made then after that investigation, that questioning has happened. For all of the reasons that I mentioned at the board meeting, because there are events that happen outside of the school. This has nothing to do with the SRO, utilizing the SRO in some sort of fashion to try to get information. The SRO has to act like a police officer, and they have to follow police officers' rules. This really does pertain to if something happens in the community and they need to be able to access a student, and they know that student is at school, that they would come in then and do the questioning at that time. It does, though, come down to a local decision if the board wants us to call either before the investigator, the questioning happens, or after. Board does get to set local policy, and there is nothing in the law that prohibits a Board of Education from saying you must call beforehand. Our administrative practice has always been to call afterwards. So that predates me in this district. I think it predates my predecessor. It goes back a while. I've talked to some people with a lot of experience, and that's just how it's been handled.
The issue when it was raised, I think, a couple weeks ago, was along the lines of, is it legal for the police to interrogate or interview a minor without the parents being present?
That's an issue for the police to take up. There are situations where that would happen. And I don't know, I can't speak to all of those situations where it would be okay, but I do know that the police have the authority to talk to a minor, to seek information if something happened on something that happened in the community. That is within their authority. They know the scope by which they can do that.
And I think that's an important part of the answer, is that we are talking here about how the police respond to it rather than how we respond.
Right. Our response has been, if we're approached, they need to speak with a student, that student can be made available and the police can talk to them. That has been our practice, and we always notify or try to notify the parents afterwards. That's why you see the language in here, attempt to notify, because sometimes we can't. But we do make that attempt. That being said, the board can say, we want you to notify or attempt to notify beforehand, and that is entirely up to the board. It would be a change of practice for us if that is the direction that the board would like to go.
And it could be us getting in the way of the police doing an investigation.
The police can tell us not to call. There are circumstances by which the police can say, if you call, you will be hindering our investigation and you're not allowed to call now. However, I don't know, again, the more and more judgment that you put into each individual decision, the more likelihood you create an opportunity for a mistake. The policy is giving administration direction to either call before this happens or after it happens. And like I said, our practice has been to call after. And sometimes that the police, will take care of that, on our behalf. They do it before we even make the phone call. But again, this is something that truly comes down to the discretion of the board. The recommendation that was put into policy captures our practice. And there was question at the board level about, is that how the board wants us to operate? And so that's why we're discussing it again today. So I've done the research. I've spoken to council. I've spoken to other school districts. I've spoken to administrators who've been in Waukesha for a long time, and I know what the past practice was in the districts that I worked in. So,
Dan?
I'm looking at the fact that if law enforcement is contacted by the administration for assistance, administration shall maintain the lead role in the investigation and shall be present or contact parent to be present.
Absolutely.
So a lot of times it's the administrator that's going to be there representing the child.
So if I'm a high school principal, and I'm just going to use you guys as an example, you guys get into a fight in the hallway, and I were to think it was something that would rise to the level of me needing to get the SRO or call the police, I would do that, but I would be questioning you guys, and I would be taking the lead. School discipline first, and if there was something that goes beyond that, disorderly conduct or battery or something like that, that would all fall then into the police discretion. What I'm doing is conducting the school investigation, and I'm taking the lead. What we're talking about is situations that happen in the community, outside of school grounds or outside of school time, or if a student were to leave for lunch and do something and then come back to school. Again, things that happen off school grounds. If they need to access that student, this is where this section of policy governs our actions.
And then the other thing I'm looking at in A1 is this is in the event of allegations involved in suspected child abuse or neglect. If that's a situation, you're calling parents and saying, "Jay, we're going to talk to your kid about this today."
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that okay?
Yeah. So, in those situations, again, I gave two examples at the board meeting, situations where perhaps there's a drug investigation going on, and by us notifying the home, we could somehow get in the way of that. Or if there's a situation of child abuse, or, alleged abuse that happened outside, and the police are trying to, again, those are the two situations that I put out there, and not that the drugs happens regularly, it has happened. Child safety is generally something else that happens, and
I have no further questions about this, Joe. I think, we agreed to this at the committee meeting last time.
Right.
Brought it to the board and are reviewing that.
Yeah, so
We have to vote on it again?
At the board, there was discussion, and then I said I'd be happy to research it further. I've done that, I'm bringing it back to you. Since there's no change in this, I think just to be safe, you may want to act on it again and say you're
We can act on it and then take it to the board in June.
correct.
Okay.
So I
Ann?
would move that we accept the revisions to policy 5540, the schools and governmental agencies, as researched and, confirmed that this is this is what we want to, offer to the board for approval.
Seconding that. And any further questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2-0, Lynn. Now, let me get my papers straightened out here because that was,
So those two items will go on to the next full board meeting, which is in June, for approval, just for clarification.
right. Yeah, for clarification for me too, thank you. This is confusing sometimes. I'm writing that down right now, June board meeting. Okay. Then we had about 10 legal updates to policies that we reviewed. Wait. Yes, we had a reading at the last policy meeting. We would be approving these tonight. These do not then have to go to the board because these are the legal updates. I'm trying to think if there's anything you really even need to go through here again.
There has been, I have not received any questions on any of these policies in between. These have been part of the packets along the way. So there would need to be, if there are none that are set aside, D through K could be approved in one motion.
As a group, yeah, that's fine. And by the way, there's an interesting, I happened to read this a couple days ago and then it came up again yesterday, a little bit. The entrance age one is really more focused on the records we get from other places, isn't it?
Let's pull that
Yeah.
up, please.
Oops. Oh, got to go deeper into this pack.
Yeah, so if you look at the entrance policy, the first page of it has just some language things. The residency requirements instead of residence requirements, that's language-based. If you go on the second, there's an appeal process that's now listed, the parents of any student denied a waiver. So that is now spelled out in the policy. Initial entry talks about complying with state law and so on and so forth. This was a change based off of some of the school safety legislation that was passed last year, where you see the statement, any student and his or her parent who enters the district for the first time must disclose the following information at the time of enrollment. So expulsions, arrests resulting in charge, juvenile justice actions, and referral to mental health. They need to disclose that, and that is an addition to this policy here.
Yeah.
And then verification of residence and such, which is something that we do.
This came up outside of the meeting we had last night on expulsions, because as you know, I'm going to be careful. As you probably know, we sometimes get records of kids where there are no records that showed up for all their
That's-
elementaries, all their years they were in elementary, all the years in whatever.
Correct. It's not uncommon for us to get incomplete cumulative records, and it just depending on the system.
But we still have the right to say no in those cases, don't we?
Well, actually, if you don't have a complete record, you're required to accept kids. So, so if you're a student, for instance, if you're a student who comes into the district, we have to enroll without unnecessary delay. So we'll get students who move in, perhaps there's an incomplete special education record, we get part of an IEP. We still have to do our best to get that student enrolled and started on time. Situations where there's a student who's placed in foster care, homeless student, we got to get those students in as soon as we possibly can. Get them a schedule, get them started within the school day. That's why this language is being added, so that we're requiring that the parents disclose this information to us. Because regardless of what is in paper, a parent would know if their child was expelled from school, know if they, had some charge out there against them, and that's why this language then is
Okay,
being built
then
in.
that's, now that straightens it out, because this is the parent that has to provide that information, because the rumor is that certain schools purposely leave the records not here.
No, I mean, we've had some school districts where we've received kids that I would say, due to their size, it's been very difficult for them to maintain a complete record of the student. When you look at large organizations, I mean, Waukesha is big, but we're by no means,
Right.
A Chicago Public Schools or a Milwaukee Public Schools where you get a lot of kids. So, we've worked with those types of districts to get records, or we get out-of-state transfers. All of that stuff plays in.
But here adds the parent in.
But this puts the responsibility on the parent. Any student and his or her parent who enters the district for the first time must disclose that information, because that then that puts the student under our code of conduct, and then allows us to talk about discipline placement
Okay.
and student assignment. Whereas you may bypass, if somebody comes in and they've got an arrest record, or they've got, an expulsion record or something like that, or charges that resulted in something, we can at least review what that is then and make a determination what the best placement is. Instead of just saying, here is access to
Okay.
X, Y, and Z school, we'll have some discretion at that point.
I'm not sure, but someplace down the line, we may want to elaborate on that for certain board members to know.
Yeah, we'll make this clear. I mean, in the summer, there are certain policies that I'm going to be orientating
Okay, good.
everybody towards, so that they know that this is going to be coming, especially as it pertains to discipline and our expulsion panels, making sure that you guys have that, front and center.
Yeah, good.
This is one that we don't have to have go before the board, but could we still take it before the board that they can become aware of it?
We can just share the information, because we can approve, in the policy we put down, we can approve this set. And we have more or less committed that we will tell you if there's something in there that you should be aware of.
Right, and so when
Okay.
Lynn puts Bill's script together for the board meeting in June, we'll be very detailed about what was passed.
That's good.
So that in the script, people will know that, this policy, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting, 5112,
5112.
that these were the substantial changes made to the policy. And the board members will have access to these packets so that they can go in and look for their own reference. But when it gets down to something that's a matter of note, a matter of importance, perhaps for an expulsion panel to have access to, we can make sure that this is front and center for them when when those panels convene.
Yeah, and I think that would be valuable in it. We said we would do things like this, and this would be an opportunity for us to come
Absolutely.
clean on that.
Yep.
That's the wrong word, come clean, but
It's not like they have to vote on it, but that they know this is a.
Well,
it's not
absolutely.
like, it's our,
has
it's a
been-
legal change that needs to be made.
It has been
and just
coming up.
become aware.
Yeah.
Sure, I mean, it's similar to, like the Teaching and Learning Committee agenda, where the chair of the committee informs the whole board perhaps that, that they approve field trips, or the F&F committee that they approve certain contracts, purchasing type contracts or whatever it might be. Within the script, right now, Kurt and Pat give the whole board that update.
That's
That's
right.
what we'll do through the policy committee.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, other than that, I think we could take this as a bundle.
Could I ask one question
You sure
about
can.
the FMLA
Yep.
policy? As I'm reading this, as they're talking about having at least 12 months, and at least 1,250 hours in the last 12-month period, et cetera, is the case then that any part-time teachers would not be eligible for FMLA leaves?
That is in order to be FMLA eligible, And I would say that if you have that question, I can bring it to Chris Hedstrom. What you're seeing in policy is what the law is telling us to do.
Okay.
Chris would be able to answer some of those more nuanced things. I know that in order to be FMLA eligible, you must have been employed for at least 12 months.
Okay.
So your first 12 months, if something comes up, my situation when I was first hired, my wife and I were having our third child, I didn't qualify for FMLA that first year of employment.
Okay.
So my time had to come through what my sick leave allocation was, which I think was 3 days permissible, and then I took a few days of vacation, and I was able to put together a little bit of time to be home with my wife and new baby at that time, help out, get started. So I know you need to be within the first, or after 12 months, then that's when your FMLA rights kick in. When it comes down to full-time, part-time staff, I would say you need to ask Chris. She'd
Well,
be able to discern that a little
there's
bit.
another part to that sentence, though. Employed by the board for at least 12 months and must have worked at least 1,250 hours during that.
Right.
Well, the normal year, well, maybe not for teachers, is about 2,080 hours.
Yeah, that would be for a 260-day employee, 2,080 hours. That's a full year
It is?
employee. Teachers are considered full-time based off of a different number of
Okay.
hours. And I think
So that's what, it would take them, then basically 9 months of a school year to get in 1,250 hours, is what you're saying.
the contracted school year comes out to about 1,400 and some odd hours, I think.
Okay, so again, the part-time would not probably fit into this equation, I guess, is what we're
Right. So if you-
talking
yeah,
about.
if you were to-
That's what I was calculating.
Then I think
They wouldn't be eligible.
Yeah, let us look it up.
But Chris would be able to answer that specific question. What I do know is that we don't get any wiggle room within the scope of the policy,
Okay.
because this is what's coming to us from the government as to how you must administer FMLA in a school district.
At least. We could go. are
You can
saying-
go beyond it if you'd like.
Well, that's just it. This is like federal and state law minimums. You know,
Yeah.
like this has to be, you know.
Right, right.
So
And
when it comes up, well, in the next month, right now, don't bother Chris, but,
yeah, no, absolutely not.
yeah.
Again, the policy is the policy. If there's
Okay.
clarifications that's sought, I would say that, you could ask Chris that question, because she'd be able to give you the answer to your specific question, but it doesn't bear on the
That's a good
policy.
question.
Just because this is saying it's not required doesn't mean we couldn't as a district allow it.
That's
Right, but we
correct.
follow you got to be very careful at what you allow and what you don't allow. If you follow what the law says, you don't ever get yourself in trouble.
Okay.
If you veer from the law and you do other things, you can get yourself in a jam, because, FMLA is a federally, it's the, forgetting the Family Medical Leave Act,
Federal Family
of
Medical
Absence.
Leave Act, yeah.
So that's where you get your protection from the law.
Okay.
If there's other things that are done, those things may be handled on a case-by-case basis, but it should still not be covered under an FMLA policy, because that really focuses us towards the act.
Okay.
Okay, those 10 policies that we would be approving,
I don't have any other questions. So I could just make a motion to approve the legal updates, items D through K, without spelling out each one of them individually, to be approved by this committee tonight, after having its first reading at the last committee meeting.
seconded here. Any questions, further questions? We had some discussion about sharing this with the board, that's good. So all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 2-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
And I lost my, here we go, okay. And no information items. We do have discussion on a couple policies, 5511 dress and grooming, and administrative guideline 5511 dress and grooming, and policy 2341 regarding interscholastic athletics. And
So if I could just clarify, the first cover sheet in your packet is the first item we'll be discussing, but unfortunately I stapled the incorrect policies, so if you could rip off your pages and
done.
flip the two of them around, I apologize for that, so,
Got it.
all righty.
Joe, you wanted us to look into that, or you wanted to bring this up for us to look into.
Yeah, so at the board meeting, Mrs. Reinacek asked about the dress code and things like that. So we pulled the policy 5511 and the administrative guideline 5511 on dress and grooming. And so what you have here is the general rules that the district has laid out going back to 2005, when did we pass our policies? 2016, I think, or when did we pass that whole policy?
2017.
2017 is when we did all the policy work going into it, and this is what we came up with under dress and grooming. So we say that, the superintendent shall establish grooming guidelines that are necessary to promote discipline, maintain order, secure the safety of students, and provide healthy environment conducive to academic purposes. Such guidelines shall prohibit student dress or grooming practices so our policy is kind of a prohibitive policy, present a hazard to the health and safety of the student, interfere with the schoolwork, create disorder, disrupt the educational program, cause excessive wear, damage to school property. If you're thinking about people who were wearing wallet chains, if you remember those, I mean, that could beat up the desks. Prevent the student from achieving his or her own educational objectives because of blocked vision or restrictive movement. Think of people with, obstructed, headgear in any way, shape, or form. We also go down and, students are prohibited from wearing hats or other headwear, including hoodies and coats. The principal may allow exceptions to the policy for religious reasons and such. We don't promote anything that's AODA, that promotes AODA, so you can't wear a shirt to school that talks about beer or, whiskey or cigarettes or anything like that. We've got administrative guidelines that designates the principal as the person who's going to make that decision. Because again, it's very difficult to create a policy that encompasses all of, student dress. And I'm not trying to make excuses for kids today, but if you do try to shop for middle and high school age kids, if you're getting past anything that are just regular blue jeans and regular t-shirts, if you go anything more fashionable than that, it's very difficult to find things then that fit within the scope because of how clothing is designed these days. So what you have in front of you is policy 5511. You see the administrative guideline that addresses things down to the principal to determine if it's a disruption to the school day, if it's appropriate for school. Having worked as an administrator at the school level, I know that these decisions can be, certain times of the year, they can be a lot more, dealing with a higher volume of it. And sometimes it depends really on the class as to which you have to say something was appropriate or inappropriate. For example, a shirt may in most classes be appropriate, but you go into another class where the student, for instance, has to do a science lab and that changes their body position and suddenly people are saying there's a problem with the shirt that the student has on. So again, a lot of those things go case by case and a lot of the discretion is left at the school level. So there is a policy, there are handbooks, and there are principals who are enforcing it. I've spoken with them. It's when you're policing schools that have 1,000+ kids, sometimes you don't hear about anything until third or fourth period as an administrator that something's objectionable. And that's then when you intervene with it, and people may say that, well, nobody's doing anything, nobody's doing anything. Well, things need to be reported in order for somebody to do things about them. I do know I've walked the hallways with our principals. When you think about hats and hoods and other things that may be inappropriate, I've watched them and observed them addressing those things with students as we've gone through the hallways. So I know it's something that is addressed.
And I guess the question is maybe that Karen was getting at. Yes, we do have a policy. Her next question, or somebody's next question might be, is it strong enough? But as you mentioned just now, how far do you go before it gets to be a problem?
And when you look at the enforceability of something, principals have the ability to call parents and say, bring another shirt to school. Parents will observe their kids leave the house dressed a certain way, and then the student takes it upon themselves to change clothes once they get to school.
Really?
So, I mean, I believe you taught at North, right? I mean, I think you saw that these things happen, as the seasons came, right? I mean, winter generally there was no issue, but in the early fall and late spring of the year, things started to change. Fashions changed over, people's careers. What was acceptable at one time is no longer acceptable. I think the policy has to give the school administration the teeth to do something, but not be so prescriptive that they can't really enforce the policy.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Well, I think the way it's worded here, that each student's mode of dress and grooming is like part of their personal style and their individual preference, and trying to acknowledge that, but yet, the guidelines of it can't be a hazard, it can't, there's like your rights end when there's a negative impact with what you're doing.
Right, and I mean, I think that we also need to be, cognizant of the fact that we are dealing with, teenage kids. What fit at the beginning of the year may not fit at the end of the year. And, we don't want to create a policy that when you look at families' economic ability to continue to buy new clothes. I mean, I've looked at what my wife and I have had to do for my almost 8-year-old and my son who just turned 4. I mean, they're small kids, but, they've grown a lot in this past year. I mean, if you've got kids that are at the secondary level where the clothes are more expensive, the shoes are more expensive, and you start dealing with growth spurts, it can be an economic challenge for families. And I think that schools have to have some flexibility
Some
to
flexibility there, yeah.
be cognizant of that.
Okay, so that's really all of that one.
Right. We have a policy. It's being enforced at the schools. It's as consistently being enforced as everybody will be, will be helpful in enforcing it. If the first hour teacher and the second hour teacher don't say anything to the administration, and the third hour teacher does, you've got 2 hours of non-compliance and then compliance. So I know that is something that's addressed with kids.
Okay, the other one on our list is, correct number is 2431. Right? We have scattered numbers here. So I just saw that now.
My edge when there's very few items.
Oh, we have to make you work harder, Lauren. Okay, so this is policy 2431, interscholastic athletics. And, be honest, I can't remember why we wanted to bring this one back up.
The athletic directors, and I'm going to give you
Oh.
what they proposed. Late last week, I was given access to.
That's what you're saying. It's okay, Brent, we're okay.
So late last week, the athletic directors, I shouldn't say they got this to me last week. They've been working on it all year. Because of a couple of changes in like when seasons exist, like, right? Baseball used to be a summer sport. It's no longer a summer sport.
And I was going to
It's
say,
a spring sport.
this indicates it was still a summer sport.
Yeah, so what you have in the yellow sheet here is what our current policy is. What's being proposed is on the white piece of paper, and again, it came in late last week, so it's this. And what the athletic directors are proposing, and again, this hasn't gone any further, but this has been a collaborative effort at the middle and high school level,
Okay, that's
is
the
that
question I had.
that they want to be able to have a document that provides guidance for students in grades 6 through 12. So all kids who begin to access extracurricular, co-curricular activities. The WIAA addresses high school sports. So if you think about the WIAA, that's a high school sports piece. But grades 6, 7, and 8, kids can participate in wrestling and basketball and track, at our school levels. And they wanted to have something that governed student behavior and conduct for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, because again, sports are a privilege. The education is a right, sports are a privilege, activities are a privilege. They wanted to be able to have something that then from the district that gave some guidance to them. So you can see athletic eligibility. What you see in yellow is what is being proposed. So again, this is a first look at this. Something for the committee to take and put their eyes on. They made some changes again because of when summer activities, what summer activities are available. The ability to access a summer school course so that they could be eligible in the fall. You'll see that the impact of summer school on fall eligibility.
Now, they have right on the first page, minimum grade point, 2.0 grade point average for 9 through 12. How are we going to score the kids that are not in high school? Because we don't use a 2.0 grade point.
Right, and this then would fall into the one or more failing grade.
Is that what they're,
So that would be the thing that would govern
middle school kid, huh?
govern the middle school kid, and then the high school kid would get the added, maintain the 2.0 grade point average.
Okay, I get it. We have to say high school, or I guess at 9 through 12, what am I
Grade 9
saying?
through 12,
Okay.
yep. And then you can see anything that is not highlighted in yellow hasn't been changed.
That is, and I've been looking, it is the non-yellow is the wording that's in here, in this,
Right, so that is the document that they worked off of.
these are became additions or deletions where they cross them off.
Right, and those are all highlighted in yellow.
This is good work. Now, what procedure are we going to follow with this? Are we going to
Well, I wanted
bring this
to,
back specifically for,
I think that this comes back to committee before it goes to whole board.
yeah,
I'll give you guys the next
Heads
month to read it and review it. I apologize for it having not been in the packet, but I wanted you to have your opportunity to put your eyes on it. And then we can come back and have a more detailed discussion at committee, and then go to our process of bringing it to committee and the board because it's a review.
when do they, assuming we like this,
Yeah.
when do they want this for delivery to the kids?
It would be ideal to have ready in August to the athletes.
We can make that if we have this at the next committee meeting, and then
Right, so if we do committee in June and board in July,
we can make it.
we can make it happen again, and like you did a couple months back where you put your disclaimer in bright green. Please read your packets because there's some things that the schools would want to have in place going into next school year. Reach out to me or Joe if you have any questions. These things then would be what the recommendation from our athletic directors are.
Just on a cursory look, I mean, it doesn't seem to be controversial.
No, and I mean, I think it does a good job of giving kids, if you're a middle school student and you make a mistake, your mistake stays with you in middle school.
Yeah, I was just reading the middle school.
So I mean, it's a policy that gives the administration the ability to administer these extra and co-curricular activities. But I think it is also flexible for the student who we understand, needs to learn and grow from mistakes.
Like that, yeah. So we will plan on reviewing this ourselves, committee. Committee may expand by then, maybe not. I don't know where we will sit with that. And if it does, I'll see to it the addition would know about this. And then meet on this June committee meeting.
Right. And just so you know, if you look in the policy, I'm just going to grab, if you look in the interscholastic policy at the back of it, you can see, for instance, penalties that are listed under Appendix A.
Yeah.
And what the athletic directors are asking is that Appendix A, they would like to put that in an administrative guideline for the policy. And then, using such, example, they, just depending on the availability of something. I'd use baseball as an example. The WIAA, used to have baseball as a summer sport for us. We moved it to spring. If any of these activities were to change season, they'd like to have the flexibility within an administrative guideline to make the change to where things fall and what the penalty would be. Because you can see how they look at 20% and 50%.
Yeah.
And likewise, if the conference were ever to be realigned, and I'll emphasize if, and the conference were to either get smaller or larger, 50% could mean different things. And because they need to be clear with families, what is 50% of the cross-country season? Or what is 50% of the football season? If the football season turned into a longer season, they wouldn't want to have to come back to the board and say, could you do a policy change because
Yeah.
the season is now longer?
In all actuality, that's really the purpose of administrative guidelines to begin with, is get that stuff that is variable, if that's the right word, out of the policy. It's not conflicting with the policy, but
And then,
it varies.
right, and the other thing that they'd be proposing to add to an administrative guideline would
Yeah,
be
this-
the policies that would then, right, so.
That.
I like that too.
I would say, I mean, of the projects that our athletic directors, in addition to administering all of the athletics and activities that go on in our school district, they have spent a considerable amount of time collaborating on this.
Yeah.
And I know, Kyle Lemieux has kind of taken a drafting lead on it, but I know that both Todd and Brian have weighed in heavily on this document, and I appreciate their efforts.
And at the middle school level, you included what? The principal, or, because we won't have.
There's an assistant principal
As
or a
athletic
dean
res-
of students who has that
That
activities
responsibility?
oversight. Yep.
This is good. If you can remember this, Lynn, I don't mean that sarcastically. You may want to, when we get to this, and I'll try and remember it too, when we try and get to the script for the board meeting.
Yep.
I may want to put a line in there just letting the board know that this is coming up. And that they will be seeing a piece of paper on this in the next week or so, this in June. For the June board meeting. One of those information items only,
I'll just put it at the bottom of your script
Yeah, I'm thinking the sooner they can see this, the better. Especially if you want to try to expedite making it available in fall.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they have those parent meetings in August. Yeah, right. If this is going to go into effect, I think we really have to expedite that this is what they're going to be, going through at those meetings rather than,
able to make it this is a revision, and if we read it. No, we can't do it in July then, can we?
Well, if you read it in June, it can be approved at the July board meeting. Because we'll come back, at the June policy meeting would be our first official stab at this, and then the board, we would seek approval at the following board meeting, which would be July, because we're doing, for
Could I read it-
revisions, it
could I
would
do
go.
it could I read it to them in June before our board meeting, before our committee meeting?
It only needs one reading at the board. This isn't a new policy.
And-
A new policy we have to
No,
go.
but we won't have read it as a committee.
Yeah, we will.
June 21st.
And then the July
Full board.
full board, and it could be in effect. at
Oh,
that
the
time.
read and approve it one night. I got it.
No, it would be 2 nights.
One night with us and the
One
second
the
night with
board.
them.
Yeah.
Right, so it'll be read and approve
And
at June policy, read and approve at July full board.
board meeting. Got it.
Yep, okay.
Couple more years, I'll have that part straight. Then we can change it again.
one little wrinkle, I cannot make it to the date that is listed here for the next meeting, for next policy. And
What
me
i-
being absent could be a problem in a
Well,
committee.
that may be presenting June 21st.
And I don't think the 21st is right, because that's a Friday.
Yeah, let's.
Okay,
Well, and if there's a new date. And the other thing is, I think that there's going to be new committee assignments coming up
Right.
in the next few weeks, so,
We may have to be flexible on June.
and I have a lot more flexibility in June.
And I might be going on a short family trip to see. So we'll have to work on that date also, but
I will make sure that I'm flexible.
for now, it would be the 19th. 18th.
18th, I think.
18th.
Tuesday, the 18th. But I will be in Copenhagen, so I'm not going to be able to make it any time that week.
Well, we'll figure something out.
Yep. And so just based off of our work, I mean, when I look ahead, just looking ahead to either June 11th, I don't know if either one of you are around. We can talk about it after the meeting. June 11th, June 25th are both times that I have in the month of June. Or any other night of the week. that we
When,
can-
are you going to be the 11th? Are you going to still be around on the 11th?
11th, I could,
That may be better for me, too.
So we'll talk after the meeting.
Okay, let's talk
Set
later.
date.
We don't need to get that in here.
okay.
Back to the agenda then. Recommendation, any recommendations for a future committee meeting?
I do. So the Board of Education, the policies are hosted on a website called Board Docs. And so when you go to our district website and you click on the policy link, it'll be the School District of Waukesha. It'll take you to Board Docs, and that's where you can look up our policies. Board Docs also has a site where the board as a whole can store, so I guess on two ends. On the Board Docs website, so again, it would be our school district website, you would click, you'd go to the board section, you'd click, meetings and agendas and minutes and such. There's a way for us to house all of that through Board Docs, where on a month-by-month basis, you'd have your agenda, and then based off of the minutes from the prior month, you'd have your minutes posted, and then any pertinent information that you would want for the public could be posted in there. So the public board packet could be hosted in the Board Docs website. So people would always have access to the information that we're discussing at our board committees and at our whole board meeting. There's also a portal in there for board members, where your board packet then could be stored, so that if you wanted paper, we could continue to do paper, but we'd also have this electronic warehouse of what we discussed in June, July, August, so on and so forth, so that after you get done with your meetings and 6 months later you remember, did we talk about this? You'd be able to go back historically and have the electronic record of what was discussed instead of either having to dig through personal files or call Sue to try to dig through packets. So there's a way to house all of that information in Board Docs. Not to say we'd get rid of a paper packet, because some people prefer that, but we could begin to move down this road. And so I'm bringing it to you guys as the policy committee first to ask if you'd be interested in us exploring it, right? You're not doing approval because we're not allocating any money or changing a practice, but we could set up a demo through the technology committee where Steve Schloman could facilitate an opportunity for board members at the technology committee to take a look at what this software looks like and see if it's a direction that we would want to go as a district.
And since both of us are on the tech committee.
Yeah.
Both of us.
And there's a cost associated with it. It's not free, and we would have to dig in a little bit deeper. But if you were to go to some school districts, and Muskego, Norway is one that comes to mind. I believe Greenfield is one that comes to mind for me. If you go there, you can really see how functional the Board Docs platform is for both the general public when they want to see what's being discussed and what had been discussed the prior month. But then also, you don't get to see what board members see, but you'd be able to see what the public sees. And Board Docs could take us through a little preview of their software.
I would be interested in pursuing it on the basis of seeing a display or whatever you want to call it, see if it's easier, because sometimes I got to go back through a stack of manila envelopes to find something.
And
Sounds like it could help with that.
And as an organization, we are moving more and more along the lines of electronic files. You look at the student management system, you look at, some of the work that we're trying to do with historical files where we're getting that scanned into an electronic database. In student services, we're using our OASIS system to begin to store all of our historical special education records. Because again, you get to a point where paper is paper and it's starting to take up tremendous amounts of space. The same thing would hold true with these packets. You'd always have access to it. When we have these policy discussions, we have that layover between when you approve a policy and when it's actually published.
Yeah.
And if we went down this road, if we had the proposed policy language and then the committee or the board approved a policy, then everybody could be directed to that language that's in the packet, right? Because there's nothing hidden about our policies. They're there for the public. So people would be able to see then what the athletic code was as it was passed at the board. It would be there, even though that there's a delay in publishing the final policy, you'd be able to go back and say the proposed language is on our website.
One of the things that I'm going to be mentioning, Mr. Steve, anyway, is every time I try and print something, I got to use a different technique to print it. And like I was printing one of the policies this afternoon, and it told me to print it using such and such. I don't even know if I have such and such. So then I end up copying it, pasting it into a Word document so I can print it on my home computer. That's that's when technology is getting too powerful.
And having been at a lot of board meetings and a lot of board committee meetings, I mean, everybody's got an iPad. And it's not, we're not at a time where it's unreasonable for people to have an iPad open or a computer open and being able to, follow along with what's being discussed and have access to all those documents. So,
Save reams of paper.
right, you can save the paper, you can save the time. We currently have a custodian driving board packets to people's homes.
Every Friday.
I'm not saying that it would go away now because some people may prefer a paper copy, but there may be a time when the board says, you know what, let's just go electronic and we don't have to do that exercise on Fridays anymore.
Where the biggest complaint will come from? Staff, because they ended up doing a lot of work on Friday afternoon to get it. We tried the electronic packet.
Well, and it depends on the format that's been used.
And maybe that's been updated by now.
Right, because the Board Docs platform, you do your work in Board Docs. And it's right there. You're uploading everything in Board Docs. I know that, on the weeks where we have a packet due, I don't bother to ask Lynn anything because I know that she is, when we did the past couple of months where you're looking at 60 or 70 policies.
When it looks like this.
Right, and that's a small packet for us.
But to
When
stand
all
at the copy machine and crank all those out is like,
It's a good half a day.
Yeah.
To run 16 copies, 20 copies.
Right, and to get to a point where that can be electronically stored and delivered.
Yeah.
Where administrative staff is putting together one packet and then it's being uploaded into a platform, it becomes a lot more efficient. There were ways of doing it in the past where it was more cumbersome because you're trying to go from a Word document to a Google document.
Scanning stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this just becomes a little bit more fluid. So it's not to make a decision, but it's just to say, we'll pass this along to the tech committee.
Let's do that.
Open it up to the board to take a look at it and ask questions, and if it's a direction that you guys want to go. We get regular communication from Board Docs on what their products are, and it's just a good time for us to bring it to you, knowing we're going into the summer.
Okay.
and you're suggesting like to go to Muskego or the Greenfield
Go to
School
the-
District
go to the
websites?
websites.
Who has it for sure?
So we could access it by going onto the website, is that what you're saying?
It's public.
Go to the School District of Greenfield and choose their board section, school board section, and then there's a board agenda and minutes, same thing with Muskego. And it'll take you to a similar page like where our policies are, and it'll take you to the board docs. And then you'll just follow the links and
And when you do go, there's a site that is secure for the board members, and there's a site that's for the public. And
Okay.
you'll be able to access the public as a non-board member,
Yeah.
but know that there's a platform in there for all the materials that you guys would need that would be considered to be confidential and such.
And I could see things that we're going into closed session over, like still being, not even, that there'd be a chance that somebody could get into that type of a leak, kind of breach.
I mean, this
If
is
people are concerned about it, like there'd be some things that could maybe be not published even in that context.
Right, I mean, these are, and when you think about the idea of confidentiality, right, I mean, these sites are, they're password protected, they are secure, they're used in a lot of places. We currently use paper, and paper is as secure as the owner of the paper makes it. That could go in a locked filing cabinet at home, or it could go in the garbage and somebody finds it in the garbage, and, so there's a lot of variance in what secure is. I do know that a lot of school districts use this and they like it.
Okay.
Because of the efficiencies that are created.
Sounds like a good thing worth looking into.
We will do that. I'll pass this along to Steve, and it'll come up at technology.
Okay.
I wanted to, under that same category, suggest a policy that was brought up at the last discussion or community comments section
Sure.
for our board meeting, to look at policy 3131 about our callback procedure. If that'd be something, just for us to be able to see what
Yep, we'll bring that.
There was questioned just to know what it actually includes.
Yep, we could bring that along.
Yeah, I mentioned we should do that. Okay?
And I think, again, and the Teaching and Learning Committee will hear about this in June. When I went through with the team of 30 to 50 teachers, the discipline conversation that we've had second semester, there's some language that everybody always needs to remember in policy, and that language is may and shall. And if may means that you can do it if you want to do it or need to do it, but you don't have to do it. Shall means you must do it.
That's a must.
And
yeah.
so when we get into this policy language, and I haven't looked closely at the one that you mentioned, but as we get into that policy language, it's important for us to always distinguish between may and shall. Administration may call somebody back, or they shall, and that then comes up to
Difference.
discretion.
Yeah.
And also things that aren't specifically listed in policy may be acceptable practices. So if you're saying that nobody will ever be called back, policy says you can't do it. But if policy is silent on it, then you may still be able to do it. So those are things that we need to tease out as we look, and that's just a good policy for us to be reminded of those language differences and such.
Okay. Okay, Dan?
Sure.
Okay. We will adjourn this meeting, and our next policy committee meeting is tentatively for the 11th. We'll talk about that.
Yep.